to introduce her, I'm going to read something that she wrote. She has a website, erinlewis.com, and this is in her bio section. If you click on About or Bio, and I thought, I can't write something this good. Of course, that's her whole book. But anyway, so this is what she wrote about herself, and then I'll say one or two more words, and then we'll bring her on. Growing up in Southern California, surrounded by beautiful people, I struggled to find my identity. Everyone else seemed to know who I was supposed to be and how I was supposed to act. But their idea of who I was didn't quite fit with how I felt inside. I knew I was just different somehow. Expressing my true self came with criticism, which caused me to question myself. And so began my search to find myself and the life I wanted to lead. Years of taking risks, enduring judgments, and self-doubt taught me that to be truly happy meant rejecting mainstream society's idea of who I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to believe. Somehow through all of this, I have found the courage to show who I really am to the world. And you know she means that literally. We all know that. I hope to help lead others down the path to their own self-acceptance. My mission now is to help people live their best lives without the need to please other people who may be miserable in their own. Whether it be discarding dilapidated belief systems, unrealistic ideals, or simply the fear of judgment, finding the courage to be yourself can be daunting. By sharing my stories, I hope to show that you are ultimately in control of your own life, and that you alone have the power to control your own happiness. I hope to provide that little nudge you may need to tell the world to kiss your butt, because you are awesome just the way you are.
Wow.
I know, isn't that great?
Yeah.
So you know Erin, I guess you know, she's a local author. In fact, that's why we met. She's a member of SacFan. She is a member of the Greater Sacramento chapter of FFRF.
Yay.
This is her third book. And a little disclosure, I have helped encourage her from behind the scenes, so she was nice enough to put my name on the copyright page. So you'll see it there. That's very, very sweet. So anyway, that's why you'll see my name there. It's just that I've been kind of encouraging. I wanted to see this book out. And it's just too unusual. It's too cool. So anyway, but full disclosure, and I don't have any other interest in the book. I just wanted to see it out. No financial interest or anything. Now, Erin has said that she will not only tonight, but forever, give a percentage of all of the sales of this book to FFRF. Forever. And that's not all. She has devoted the entire last page of her book to FFRF.
Wonderful.
I know, it just says FF, Freedom from Religion Foundation, there's the address. She gives 2 paragraphs and then encourages people to sign up. And it's just because, well, you'll find out. You'll find out why she cares so much about FFRF as the evening goes on. So hopefully she'll inspire you to take your own risks, to question everything if you don't already, and to find yourself and your real friends and to be happy. So please welcome our friendly neighborhood stripper and brazen atheist, Erin Lewis. I might fall off. I fell off this earlier trying to get.
Your seat is
Hi, Erin.
Hello, Judy. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
I was complimenting her the other day and I said, "Oh, you're perfect." I love her response. I don't know if you remember what you said. You said, "No, I'm not as perfect that I can fake it." I love it. I consider that stripper talk. Oh my goodness. Well, what we're going to, let me know if you can't hear us because we're trying to use these and we're recording as well. Your mic okay? Oh, you shouldn't have to lean forward. I think it's okay. Okay. So the agenda for tonight is that I'm going to ask Erin my outrageous questions. Did you see that I used the word outrageous? Did you see that?
I did.
You did. So you're prepared.
I am.
All right, so I will ask her my questions. Hopefully the ones that you would be wondering too. They're not all outrageous, but I hope that she doesn't know questions. She doesn't know them all. And then after we have maybe 20, 30 minutes, I don't know how long it'll go of just my questioning her, she's going to do readings from her book. I don't know about you, but I love to hear an author read their own work. So she's going to step over here, and I'm going to go sit down, and that'll be about 20 minutes, because she has several selections. It would take all day to read the whole thing, but pretty pithy selections. I think you'll be very entertained. The time will go fast. Then I'll come back up and I'll lead a Q&A, just about 10 minutes, because if you have a lot more questions, she'll be sticking around after the book signing. She can stick around for a little while. After she does her reading and the Q&A, I have some free stuff to give away. She has a merchandise store, because she goes by Brazen Atheist, and you can buy Brazen Atheist stuff. It's very cool stuff. I have some to give away. And it's going to be quick answer, first one with the answer, and the questions are going to come from what we say tonight. So you have to listen up if you want free stuff. Then after that, then she'll go over and you can buy some books from Mary. And remember, you want to buy 2 or 3, because we all know people who would love this unique gift and will read it when you have gone home. Seriously. All right. Hi, Erin.
Hello.
You have not heard this first question before.
Okay, I'm sure.
So confident. I love it.
Well, now I expect you to surprise me.
I know. I'm going to start with stripper questions,
Okay.
and then I will transition into book questions. All right. So, stripper question number 1. How does it feel to be in front of an audience with your clothes on?
Weird.
So fast. She didn't know I was going to ask that. You're so fast. Can I elaborate on that?
Yeah.
Just weird in what way?
Honestly, I'm not used to people hearing me talk. I'm not used to people actually wanting to hear what I have to say. So it's definitely a new experience for me.
Good. Well, welcome. Thank you. And we all love you. We're all friends.
I hope so.
Okay, now here's a question that I want to know. You never see strippers in the wild. I mean, where do they go? What do they do? How do they live in the stripper house? I don't know. So my question is, do you guys like have stripper houses, stripper neighborhoods, and you have nude pictures on the street lamps and shag carpeting instead of lawns? I mean, you never see them in the grocery store. What's with that?
I would say it's probably a lot like atheists or free thinkers. It's not something you generally wear on your sleeve unless you're, actually trying to make people know who you are. It's one of those things where, you've probably met a whole bunch of them. Went to the fair recently and ran into a whole group of girls that I knew, and I can usually spot them by their fake eyelashes. They're everywhere. Strippers are regular people. They're not anybody that is, you're really going to notice unless they're trying to make you notice. So if you go maybe to Las Vegas to the Adult Entertainment Awards, you can see a lot of strippers. You're going to know that's what they are. But other than that, no. Go to the grocery store and all that stuff.
So you guys are in the grocery stores and everything?
Yeah.
And I'm being snarky on purpose, because when I was a school teacher, they all thought teachers lived at the school. And when my students would see me in the grocery store, they'd freak out. And so I kind of knew the answer already, is that, yeah, of course you're everywhere, but you're not in character. Mm-hmm. All right. Do you have shagged instead of drawing grass? Your lawn? Do you have a lawn, right?
I do have a lawn, actually. 2 of them.
Did you grow up wanting to take your clothes off? How did you get into stripping?
I got into stripping because I hated my job. I graduated high school early, and so I got into college early. And because I worked so hard to get out of high school, when I started college, I was really ready to be done with school, and it was expensive. And I was making, I think, $4.65 an hour. So I thought I would just be a waitress, and that lasted about a week. And before I got the ultimatum, and that was it. I pretty much at that point, my rent depended on it. So I did it, and I really liked it. I liked the freedom, the independence. Of course, I dropped out of college, otherwise I would have been a lawyer.
You'd make a good lawyer.
There's actually a lot of parallels. I would say quite a few. Well, we talk a lot. We argue. We convince people of things. So yeah. We're probably paid more than we should be.
Wow. Okay, I already know the answer because it's in your book. How did your first ad response go when you saw an ad and you went, your very first one?
The very first one was for an alcohol service for like bachelor parties. So I was 18. I thought that meant I was going to jump out of a big cake, you know, in a bikini and yell surprise. And I walked in and they told me I was too short and too pale, and that my boobs were too small. So apparently those were qualifications I didn't have. So it was actually pretty humiliating and disappointing, and it was really, it was a little eye-opening. So.
But you kept trying. That's what I find interesting.
It's more how much I disliked the job I was working.
Got it.
And so I thought, and that's when I saw the ad for a waitress at a strip club, and it was a topless waitress. So I thought, well, I'll make more tips. I won't actually be nude. I won't really be a dancer. I'll just, you know, do that. And I thought, you know, how could it have been any worse than my first experience? So I figured I might as well give it a shot. So.
And you did. And she uses those stories to good effect in her book. She says what you've learned from all that. Actually, that response you got from that first place you went and said, "Oops, too small." This isn't in your book, but you've told me, and I'm going to take a chance. That's similar to what Donald Trump's nephew said, right?
Oh yes. Well, actually, behind the scenes, he never actually said it to my face. So they just called me up, and then I got like close to him, and then he like shooed me away, and then they told me, "Oh yeah, go away. Your boobs are too small." And I was like, "Okay, well,
okay." I find that so hard to believe.
Yeah.
Interesting. Erin, you were raised Catholic.
Yes.
Yep. How did this go over? Did you tell your family right away?
I told them about a month in. I played the waitress thing for about a month, and then I figured that it was better to just let it all out than let them either find out the hard way or to just continue lying. And they were also, both my parents were self-employed. My dad has a small business, so we're Republicans. So when I just told them that I was going to be making money and they weren't going to be loaning me anymore, they all of a sudden didn't have a problem with it.
I like the way you put it in the book, something about how money can override your religious
It really
fundamentals.
does. Yeah, all of a sudden they just go right out the window. So no more worrying about that kind of thing. The only thing I would say that my family, I have 3 big brothers, like Catholic, I'm the last of 6. So my brothers were concerned about my safety. And when I told them, you know, that I was surrounded by big bouncers and wasn't allowed to walk out to my car by myself, that there were security cameras, that really kind of alleviated most of that. But that was really the only concern was for my safety. But as far as the modesty thing goes, no, I'm not sure where they missed that part in the Bible.
In your 20 years career as a stripper, did you make good money?
I did. It's not something, if you do end up reading any of my books, it's not something that I mentioned specifically for a couple of different reasons. Sometimes when you start talking about money and how much money you make, it sounds like you're bragging and that kind of thing, and it really wasn't that. One of the reasons that I kept dancing as long as I did was more to be able to have the freedom to be home with my son once I had my son, and to also have the freedom to pursue other things. So I wasn't stuck in a 40-hour job, and I just really had a lot of independence. But as far as the money went, yeah, I did okay. I did pretty good. So
I'm waiting for you to tell us a couple of things that came out of that when you, because I know the answer to this. That's why I'm pushing you.
Yeah, I know.
What do you think?
I mean, I was able to buy my my BMW, and a new set of boobs, so that was awesome. Actually, one facilitated the other.
But left and right, no.
Yes, yes. Well, I got them one at a time, so no.
I'm not used to people topping me. Okay. Did you have regulars, people that you kind of actually even like?
Yeah, actually a couple, quite a few. It's hard to see somebody, you know, every couple of months or every week and not actually, you know, get kind of attached to people. It's not all, you know, dirty old men in trench coats. It really isn't. There's a lot of people, a lot of intelligent people. So you definitely make a certain connection sometimes.
That leads into this next question. Did you have customers, not all, but at least one or some, did you have customers with good marriages at home?
Yeah, and sometimes it was just a matter of kind of getting out and it's just a bit of an escape. You know, as opposed to going to the bar or going gambling or things like that, sometimes you just come and hang out and you have a conversation, you hear about somebody's week, you know, or how their day went, or maybe they were stressed and they just kind of wanted to forget about stuff, and that's pretty much what a lot of people that I do provide is like a distraction. It's like going in and seeing a movie, but it gives you a little bit of an interaction, but there's a certain, I always mess up this word, anonymity to it. Did I say it right? Anonymity? There you go. Okay. So if somebody doesn't know me, they don't know if I'm telling them my real name, I don't know them, I don't care, so I don't need to, we don't need to go any farther than that. So it's almost like a, it can be like a therapy type relationship, like a counselor, where it's just really kind of anonymous, but it gives you that outlet to speak. And sometimes it was even like that for me, where there were people that I was able to speak to about things that I knew was never going to, literally never going to go anywhere. Because, I mean, who do I know? I don't know their family, they don't know mine, so.
Did you ever get people who just wanted to talk?
Yes.
Just needed, really?
Yeah.
Should I start saving my money now?
Yeah.
I can't afford it.
Yeah, no, a lot of people, definitely, especially on the older side.
Aw.
So,
Yeah, almost like a Catholic confessional, huh?
could be, sometimes, yes.
Okay, on that line, that some of them actually do have good marriages at home, what would you tell a spouse, let's say a wife, just sticking with heterosexual couples, who doesn't know why her husband goes to a strip club? What would you tell her?
Ask him. I mean, honestly, I think the biggest issue in any relationship, be it heterosexual, platonic, or marriage, is communication. I think that when people don't talk enough, they're not maybe understanding where the other person is coming from or what they're going through, or maybe there's certain things they're afraid to say to each other. But I would say communication is really, would be the biggest thing.
I think you just answered my next question. What advice would you give a spouse to have a better sex life, in particular, at home?
Honestly, a bottle of wine and a good conversation. I mean, for reals. Yeah,
Oh,
maybe
that's
even find out, I mean, so we all know that maybe sometimes when we're alone, we might pick up our phones and kind of go to a, you know, maybe a naughty site. So one of the questions I might ask is, you know, what are you looking at? You know, and that can give you a good clue as to where they're going. Maybe they're interested in something that they're afraid to tell you, and that's a good way to find out.
A bottle of wine and a good conversation.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Kathy, what wine do you like?
I don't want her to ruin her shirt. It's like,
You didn't see it, maybe you did. She was drinking water and it
I had to stop drinking, yeah.
Erin, what about your marriage?
what about my marriage?
You know, you must get questions, you know, how long have you been married?
It'll be 20 years in March.
All right.
And no, I didn't meet him in the club. I met him at the record store. You know, for me, I was already a dancer when I met my husband, and it was a really good deal breaker, because if you're gonna be with somebody and they're gonna be jealous, you're gonna find out right away. And so it was either take me as I am or go find someone else. So it was fairly easy.
So it works all right?
It does, absolutely. I mean, every relationship, be it friendship or whatever, takes, like I said, communication. That's really the biggest thing. As long as you keep talking and you keep enjoying spending time together and you keep growing together, I think that's the biggest thing.
And I happen to know you now. I've known you for
Yeah.
maybe 10 months or whatever. And I happen to know that you have very definite boundaries.
I do.
Very, very definite. I think perhaps built because of your career that you're in. But I'm very impressed with those boundaries, and your husband must know that too. That maybe that, because you say communication, I imagine trust is also, you're a very easy person to trust because you're very open and very firm with your boundaries. So I'm sure that has a lot to do with it.
Definitely.
Sounds like you found a neat guy.
I did actually. He's pretty neat.
Okay, talking about strippers now. Look around.
Okay.
Look around. This side too. Over here too. You've kind of been ignoring these people over here.
Oh, I have.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
so
yeah.
sorry. Okay.
So look around. Without pointing anybody out, unless you want to, what's it take to make a good stripper? Who would make a good stripper?
Absolutely.
Oh, put your hand down, John. Who would make a good stripper?
Absolutely anybody. Honestly, when it comes to aesthetics and the way that we look, it's all smoke and mirrors. I mean, you can take a look at some of our pop stars and some of the celebrities you look, and if you were to see them without makeup, you'd be horrified. For reals, it really takes, $100 and a trip to Ulta. There just is, that's a makeup store.
Oh,
Sorry. But for reals, it really is more about personality. If you like doing what you're doing, and you enjoy being on stage and performing, I think that really has a lot to do with it. But people think that it has a lot to do with looks, but it really doesn't. It has more to do with your personality and your willingness to be open with other people.
and I think you enjoy it. I mean, I know you enjoy the job.
I did. It's a hard thing to do if you don't like it. Definitely.
Oh, I imagine. The reason I asked that question, who would make a good stripper, is because sometime back, you and I are both marching together in the Pride Parade. Pride Parade.
Yeah.
You were with our chapter,
Yes.
helping carry the banner and hand out papers and stuff. And I was joking around with you before the parade, and I said, oh yeah, I could, and I kicked up a leg just in a stupid way. I said, there we go. And your comment, you said, I've seen people make money doing that. And that's why I asked that question, because I knew you were going to say anybody. That's amazing.
Well, a lot of people will say, well, don't you have to be able to do pole tricks and all this kind of stuff. I've never done a pole trick in my whole life. You really don't, because it just isn't about that. It's about, like I said, it's more about personality than it is anything else. So.
Okay, I still have a shot. I just thought she laughed. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that you just quit.
I mean, you did now, so.
Maybe I wasn't supposed to say that, but like, just. So here's a loaded question, and I already know the answer, but I want you to spell it out. Are you quitting because you feel that you suddenly need to conform to society?
No, not at all. I don't think I'll ever be able to conform in the way that I once felt like I had to. I quit mostly because my son is starting high school. That was pretty much a big reason. Because he's going to start going to school with kids that are going to be old enough to get in there, and I really don't want to make high school any harder than it already is. Plus I have my books out and things like that. And then the other reason is really just, 20 years is a long time. And I kind of felt like with this book coming out that this was a nice way to kind of tie it up. I'm also not going to retire with a gold watch and a pension. So I want to, no, nothing. I really got nothing. No, it was really pretty anticlimactic, I gotta say.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm
They're
all right with that.
lost.
Yeah, so, I'm hoping there's somebody that's missing me. So,
The owner.
yeah.
Erin, you are atheist.
I am.
Which gets a harsher reaction? Saying you're a stripper or saying you're atheist?
Absolutely atheist. Hands down, the hardest thing.
Can you elaborate on that? Why?
Because the word itself is loaded. speaking of loaded questions. I don't think that enough people understand what the actual definition of the word atheist is. They think you eat babies or worship Satan or, you're a witch or any host of other silly ideas. And it just has developed, I think, I'm not sure when, but over the years it developed some sort of negative connotation to it. And so there's a lot more judgment. People are generally okay with you if you tell them that you believe in something, whether it be, the universe or Thor. I would love to believe in Thor personally. It's harsh, especially coming from my background. That was definitely worse.
And she talks a lot about that more in the book too. Here's your last stripper question, then I'll move to the book questions.
All right.
And I only want a yes or no on this, and you'll know why. Everybody will know why. I only want a yes or no.
Now I'm scared.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Did you ever, in your club or you personally, have clients whose names we would definitely know? Celebrities or politicians or public eye people?
No. Maybe a couple like D-listers, like local D-listers. So yeah, no, from like the 90s. So yeah, probably not. They would probably be thrilled for me to actually mention.
Oh, let's move on to questions about the book. And let's see. This book came from an idea that started at an FFRF convention, Freedom from Religion Foundation. Not everybody here is a member of that. And you are giving a percentage of proceeds from sales of this book forever to FFRF. And the last page of the book, I won't hold it up yet, the whole last page of the book has nothing else on it except about FFRF. What first impressed you about FFRF? What got your attention?
Well, I started following them on Facebook because I started to look at some other atheist pages and things like that. I think the Friendly Atheist was actually my first one. And I kind of liked what they did, and I liked what they posted, and I liked that. Granted, I like the silly memes and the, anti-religion memes and all that stuff. That's all funny, but I liked that they were doing something, and it felt like they were helping, and it felt like they had other than just bashing religion, which, like I said, is fun sometimes. I felt like they were actually having an effect, and working towards something that I really believed in.
Can you share a little bit about the bicycle story that's in your book?
How I actually started to connect with them and why I became a member was because my son brought home a flyer telling him that his entire school was getting a free bike. And
one per student.
One per student. The entire school in Fair Oaks, mind you, was getting a free bike. And I thought, well, my first thought was, this must be for needy kids, and we don't get free lunch or anything like that. And so I thought, my first thing when he told me this was, you're probably going to end up donating that. You just got a bike for Christmas. I was like, this is not meant for you. So let me take a look at the flyer. So I did, and all it said was destiny. Free bike giveaway, come to this event and every kid will get a bike. And, your school has been chosen. And I thought, well, this is really weird because it's not telling me where it's coming from. So I look up Destiny and I find out it's a church. It's a big church in Rockland. And I'm like, okay, so now my kid's got to go to this Christian event. And my thought was, well, before I freak out, I messaged them on Facebook and asked them what the event was about. And of course, they assumed that I was excited. And I was not. And they told me that it was a message of hope. And I'm like, okay, so we're gonna send, Jewish kids and Muslim kids and, atheist kids there to get a message of hope from Jesus so that they can get a free bike. So I walked into the principal's office with the flyer, and the first thing she says was, oh, you're a member of Destiny? And I said, I am not. And I let them know what I learned through FFRF and their website, that was unconstitutional, that they shouldn't be pushing that type of event, especially because I told my son that he wasn't going to go, because now he's going to catch a bunch of stuff from the other kids. He's the one that's not getting a free bike. And when I emailed FFRF and a couple of other organizations, the ACLU, this was right after our last election. The ACLU was understandably really busy. FFRF responded to me almost immediately, ended up sending the district a letter, and they pulled the flyers and they stopped sponsoring the event, and I promptly became a member.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Actually, I think it was Andrew Slidell who just has his book out too. Actually,
he does.
who wrote the
Yeah.
letter. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Describe your FFRF San Francisco Annual Convention experience. Was it what you expected walking into a bunch of atheists?
I don't know that I expected a lot. I had gotten, because I had been a member, I got the information and I was like, oh, it's in San Francisco, it'd be great if I could go. The month prior, the editor had published an article of mine. I don't know if you read it. He was, the Bible taught me that God is a jerk. And originally it was called God is a Jerk, but apparently I got edited. And so I had been emailing the editor back and forth, and I thought, well, I might as well go. I won't have to cook or clean for a weekend, and who doesn't like San Francisco? So yeah, I decided to go, and when I walked in, I was a little late and flustered, getting out of traffic, and I walked into the first event on that Friday night, and a guy named Salman Rushdie was speaking. I didn't know who he was, so my bad. And I listened to him talk, and the more I listened to him talk, and then I was kind of halfway reading about him at the same time, I was absolutely enthralled and mesmerized, and from that moment on, I was pretty much taken in. And I started to meet a few people. We sat down for dinner, I believe, that night, and I sat at a table with a bunch of strangers. And I was kind of like, okay, nobody knows me. I have my tag on, and it was really friendly. It was really awesome to sit down with a bunch of people, and within 30 seconds, we're all discussing different books that we read, and I'm like, oh my God, these people read. In my profession, I don't meet a lot of readers. So it was really cool to be able to discuss those kinds of concepts and to be able to be open and to understand how many people had been kind of in the situation that I did, where they may have had to have gone to church, you're sitting and you're going, this doesn't make sense, but I can't say anything, and so the connections that happened on day one were really pretty amazing for me.
Very good. And you would compare that to a church gathering how?
I think that part of the draw of church and organizations like that is the fact that you do have a certain sense of community, that you are sitting with a bunch of other people that are supportive, or at least you think they are, until you say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing or ask the wrong question. But I do think that there's that certain sense. The next day, I believe, when we met and we were sitting, and they're singing the songs about science and all that kind of stuff, and it's like, everybody's got a smile on their face. Everybody's there for the same reason. And there was definitely a sense of family and community.
Okay, so that's how it's similar. How's it dissimilar in the church gathering?
I mean, there's a lot less judgment, and nobody's trying to convince you of things that aren't true. If you have a disagreement with somebody or you have a differing opinion, I think there's a more open-mindedness to it. There's atheists have a sense of curiosity that believers don't.
I find that refreshing too.
Yeah.
This is your first book. And
That's my second. That's my first one, yeah.
This is your first book? Yeah. How could I have gotten those mixed up?
I don't know.
Okay, well, so your first book, Dirty Money, Memoirs of a Stripper. What led you to write this book, your first book?
It's funny because I didn't realize that they all actually tied into religion, but they do kind of. I have a brother who is he's not Catholic anymore, he's an evangelical, I guess. And so he told me that he's never really liked my job. And he told me to check out a lady who had written a book about her experience as a dancer. She's from down south, and I only looked at her bio before I was hugely disgusted with her. She talked about how awful it was and how all the girls didn't like what they did and how they were all drug addicts, how a lot of them were prostitutes, and how, you know, God's plan for her was to be a drug addict and a prostitute, and then to find Jesus. And apparently this was my brother's plan for me. And I honestly was pissed. I was pissed. I felt like she was perpetuating stereotypes. She was describing, you know, the typical Dr. Phil stripper you see, you know, that's in a bad relationship, or, you know, dating a guitarist and, you know, he's smoking pot on the couch. I mean, it was every stigma and stereotype you could possibly imagine, and it was not my experience. And I've met probably 300 strippers that say they're going to write a book. Oh, I should write a book. And I thought, you know what, I should write a book. And so I just started, and that was it. So yeah, actually anger. Anger's what made me first start to write.
I found it very readable. I mean, it's behind the scenes. It was very cool. Who did you write it for? What was your audience for this book?
It's hard to say. I'm tempted to say that my audience was me, maybe at first.
Okay.
And then it was for anybody that had questions and anybody who thought that the typical stripper was a drug addict or somebody incapable of holding a job or a relationship.
Plus
or
the stereotype.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was to kind of.
No, I'm sorry, I thought this was your first. No, this was your second. I don't know if you can tell what that is. It's just stripper shoes. That's
Actually the top of the locker at the strip club.
Oh, it is?
It is. Girls will tend to throw their old stuff on top of the lockers and then it just gets really dusty, and I just thought it looked terrible, so I figured I'd take a picture. So,
Mine says, think you want to be a stripper? So what made you write this book?
That was published last August, and my thought then was that I knew that I was coming to a point where I was going to be leaving, and I wanted to write something to kind of leave behind for the other girls. So a lot of this is, there's a lot of etiquette, there's a lot of, you know, making sure that you are creating boundaries when you're in that environment so that you're not getting caught up by, you know, people that are out to get you. There's a lot of sharks, there's a lot of people looking to exploit girls in there. So it's really written with them in mind.
It's really written for everybody. Anybody. I loved reading it. I really did. Even though you wrote it for the girls coming up.
I did, and as I was writing it, I kind of almost had a switch in my head that it was like, this really kind of describes, at least in a humorous way, I basically made fun of the whole thing. So that anybody can read it.
They're very readable, very readable. She's only asking $7 and $9. I mean, God, I keep trying to tell her to raise her prices. Anyway. How is this book different? This is the one that just came out. Expose Yourself.
This book is definitely written for everybody in mind. People that may be kind of hiding who they are, and especially after the FFRF convention is what really opened my eyes to the fact that there are a lot of people that aren't ready to be open about either their non-belief or people that maybe have a hard time just really being themselves. And so that had a lot to do with this book in particular.
Yeah, it's got tremendous advice. And she tries never to say the same story in any two books, so they all have different stories in them. Okay, I just had a text today from David Fitzgerald, who says he's starting it. He asked to read it. Tracy Harris, Atheist Experience. Daryl Ray, who wrote Sex and God, and has a lot of other, but these people are all reading her book. It's real world self-help advice from a stripper. I mean, it's getting a little buzz. They're all reading your book. You had someone interested in maybe trying to get a review into Playboy, and that was a very notable person. I won't say the name, but they would know. You also have podcast interviews that you're going to be on the authors panel at Free Thought Day. So kind of a related question to all of that. And you've almost answered it a little bit. How does it feel for people to read, and this is a serious question, to be reading your words as opposed to being naked on a stripper stage?
It's more exposing, unintended. Because I've already gotten over being judged for how I look, and there's plenty of people that don't think, you know, I should have even been a stripper. But so many people assume that I don't have anything to say that it is kind of terrifying to think of people actually reading what I have to say. It's sort of like, it's like being on stage all over again for the first time.
I think I'd like to share something that you told to me in San Francisco when we had just met. I think it was the second day of the event or something. And we were sitting down waiting for a speaker, and it was a serious moment, and you were sharing the heartfelt amazement, I guess, and the way you said it was something, I can't remember your phrasing, something weird about, I'm not used to being appreciated for what's up here. Usually it's what's down here, and that's just all silicone and surgery. That's what you said. And so that's why I love the way you phrase it, and you're so honest about saying everything. So that's why I asked you that question, you know, because I know that it is a whole different judgment that you're preparing for people to listen to you as opposed to just being on stage, which you've done for 20 years. So you're starting out with this. Second to the last question. You use brazen atheist on social media and at your merchandise store. We're going to give some away in a little bit. But atheist, the word atheist is nowhere on the cover of your book, front, back, or anywhere. Why? Does that affect the audience you were trying to get, or?
I would like to reach everybody, because this book has a lot to do with atheism and humanism, but it also has a lot to do with identifying things like misinformation and pseudoscience, and you know, that's for everybody. And the other part of it is that there's 7 billion people in the world, and not everybody is really wired to be an atheist. But yet there's still some things that I think people can use, even if they are unable to let go of some sort of magical thinking or belief. And you know, we all probably have people that we care about that are in that boat, where for whatever reason they're not able to let that go. And so I wanted it to be open for everybody. So even if they don't want to, you know, if they don't identify as atheist, it can at least make them kind of question. So maybe they can start to wonder, you know, am I in control of my life, or do I really need to be waiting for somebody else to give me purpose or a plan? So I really wanted to, I left that word out deliberately, although I do go into it quite a bit, so that it would be welcoming to everybody.
Right, yeah, very good. Okay, I wanted to list a few of the things that you cover in your book, and yet there are 23 chapters, but I just picked, so I have a little short list here of things that are valuable for everybody, because it's not a book about atheism. So here's a short little list of some of them. You talk about taking risks, handling failures, what you lose by conforming, finding your own uncomfortable thinking, taking responsibility, marital relationships, being self-aware, hoaxes, superstitions, and bullshit, where your real friends are, humanism, secular parenting, acceptance with boundaries, and it goes on and on and on. There's just so much. So it isn't a book about atheism. It's really a great, great self-help book. So here's my last question before we ask you to read. What feeling do you want people to have when they close the last page of your book?
That they're not alone. That everybody is different in some way or another. But even with that, you'll always find somebody else that is here to accept you. There's always somebody that is going to understand. And so basically, yeah, I want people to know that they're not alone.
I love that. Thank you. Wonderful.
I want to be yelling. Okay, this is a little different than reading to my son, so I'm going to do my best. He's not interested in any of my books, by the way. So shortly after I started stripping, the entirety of the football team from the high school I had attended ended up in the very club where I was working. Although I was born in Southern California, I had moved to a tiny town in the middle of the Sierra foothills with my mom when I was 10. Having never completely adjusted to small town life, I was not what you might describe as popular. Because of my smart-ass reputation, I was always at odds with the cool kids, which definitely included the football team and their groupie cheerleader counterparts. That being the case, these guys were delighted to see me. They reveled in the fact that they had caught me doing something dirty and would get to tell the whole town, resulting in my complete and utter embarrassment. But alas, the joke was on them. I had already told my family, thereby removing any and all gossipy ammunition they thought they had. Unfortunately, the English teacher's daughter was also on the dance list that night, and having not told anybody about her new career, was not as lucky. Her parents found out the hard way. Being honest did not eliminate all of the concern from my family. Coming from a Catholic background, my stripping was difficult for them at first. Fortunately for me, both of my parents were self-employed and understood my need for independence from traditional employment. I was also able to point out that with the income I was making, it was highly unlikely that I would be calling to ask for money. Funny how money can override fundamental religious values. Risks cannot, for all intents and purposes, be avoided, but the risks we choose to take should be considered carefully, like jumping off a cliff, bridge, or out of a plane. Some risks we choose simply to enrich our lives, while other risks we have to take simply to keep living. Learning to take risks is really about overcoming anxiety. Sometimes that anxiety is warranted, but much of the time it's just an irrational fear. Our brains are expressly wired to keep us alive, and that's why we tend to get anxious about some things that are, for the most part, safe. I went on a zip line for the first time a few years ago, and although my brain kept telling me that I would die, I knew that in reality it was safe. The trick was convincing my brain that I would be okay. Once I let go and I started moving, it was exhilarating, despite the fact that I kept picturing myself plummeting to my death or the harness rupturing a breast implant at the end of the line. All of those fears were ultimately deemed irrational. If I had given in to them, I would have missed the experience, and my husband would have had fun calling me a pussy for the rest of the trip. If and when I do it again, I will likely experience the same anxiety, but to a lesser degree. Ghostly menage a trois. The only people in your marriage should be living, breathing human beings. Seems like common sense. God or other supernatural force has absolutely nothing to do with your partnership. The idea that you are meant to be with someone, or that there is some kind of purpose outside of your own and your partner's happiness, is crap. Imagine if your nosy neighbor was sitting in the room with you while you were having sex. That would be weird. Why is it any less weird to think that a God is watching you all the time? It's not, because just like your neighbor, God doesn't belong there. Unless he's going to join in. It's ridiculous to think he is somehow involved. In fact, it's kind of fucked up. You didn't marry God, you married a person. I can't imagine a bigger mood killer than the thought of an all-knowing, all-powerful being judging me in my most intimate moments. How would you ever get off? Unless, of course, you're into being watched. Then I suppose that might be a good thing. I truly believe that the most important thing in finding a partner for the long term is sex. For humans, like most animals, sex is one of the most powerful natural drives. In order for our species to survive, we need to make more of us. An urge that strong can compel us to make some tremendously idiotic decisions, like getting into a marital arrangement that we didn't really want, like the excitement of a new outfit, a first kiss, or touch that blinds us. That jolt of adrenaline can cloud our judgment of reality, and not just the reality of a life decision, but also the reality of our own true desires. It doesn't only have to be the physical excitement of a new partner either. It can be emotional as well. We all want to be loved and desired. Sometimes we are so happy to find somebody that is interested in us that we put aside our reservations and doubts in order to feel loved. As the physical and emotional aspects of our natural instincts can lead us to make brash choices, sometimes there can be a social element leading us too. The idea that you aren't supposed to have sex until you found the one is one of them. One of my best customers was someone who stayed a virgin until he married his wife. His wife was also lacking any real sexual experience. Is it any wonder this guy found himself pouring his heart out to a large-breasted stripper in an upscale club in Reno? Probably not. While running up his credit card, I helped him work through all his feelings about his failing marriage. He loved her, but they were simply not compatible in bed. They both came from a religious background and had gone to premarital counseling before being wed. They did all the things they were taught to do and it failed miraculously. Now that they were stuck together in a sacred union under God, to leave would be sinful. His wife chalked it all up to God's plan, saying they had to work it out. My customer had a foot fetish and liked brazen redheads, while his wife was a soft-spoken brunette with ticklish feet. These differences are not the kind of thing that can be worked out in counseling. They may have cared for each other, but by following the divine advice and guidance they were given, they doomed themselves to a life of frustration and guilt, not to mention an astronomical visa bill. My bad. Trust me, I'm not a doctor. Outsmart the alluring spokesperson. There are many perks that come with being a stripper. For instance, when an establishment I worked for partnered with a local radio station, I was chosen to help promote the club. In return, I went to many concerts for free, got a ton of t-shirts and other swag, and was lucky enough to be chosen to wrestle in Lucky Charms on St. Patrick's Day. I'm on the fence as to whether to consider the latter a perk because it was super gross. I had my face dunked in melted marshmallows and reconstituted powdered milk. There are other perks as well. Strippers get discounts, sometimes at local businesses that sell costumes and other stripper gear. Costumes being a bit of a misnomer if you ask me, since it's not like we're hiding much. We also have access to free professional advice, like the lawyer in Vegas who explained to me how to win a judgment against an unscrupulous landlord, or the financial advisor who told me to never take advice from a financial advisor. There was the pharmaceutical lobbyist who unintentionally gave me information as to how the future opioid problem would start, bragging about his sales pitch to doctors. Strippers tend to meet a lot of doctors as well. I met an optometrist who let me in on the disposable contact racket, saving me quite a lot of money. When meeting these types of professionals in the strip club setting, you can learn a lot that the general public may not get to hear for free. I may have mentioned this earlier, but boobs and booze make guys talk, like a sexual truth serum. I tend to trust what I hear from these guys because they are paying me, not the other way around. They simply don't have any financial motivation to lie to me. The only reason a customer may lie to me would be to impress me, like the guy who told me we could travel the world because he was El Chapo's nephew. I was not impressed, by the way. I told him, sure, we could travel the world on the cartel's money and then retire in a sunny ditch somewhere, sans heads. That guy was likely lying. At least I hope he was. But for the most part, I believe the professionals who tell me about their respective industries. In the early 2000s, I was working at a topless bar, which happened to be located next to a chiropractic office. Dr. Bob was a frequent patron of the bar, and I talked with him often, but never lap danced for him. He would tip occasionally on stage. I liked Dr. Bob. So when he noticed me rubbing my back one day and offered an exam in his office, I accepted. Usually I don't see any customer outside of the club, but Dr. Bob was not only a doctor, but everybody knew him at the club. He had treated other dancers, staff, and I think even the owner. I had good reason to not be as cautious around him as I would with other customers. Plus, none of the other girls said he was weird when he was alone with them in his office. His office was normal, and the exam professional, I had to hand it to him despite eyeballing my boobs at least twice a week. He was very respectful. Had I not known him from the club, I wouldn't have guessed by his exam that he went to strip clubs at all. No wandering hands or creepy comments. His bedside manner was impeccable. His diagnosis seemed on the mark too. My spine was out of alignment, causing my lower back pain. The super high heels were the likely culprit. He described his treatment plan, and we worked out an affordable payment and treatment schedule. He even gave me a free adjustment on my first visit. It didn't help much, but that's because it would take multiple treatments to fix my problems, he said. When I went back to the club, there were several girls who asked how it went. I told them about my diagnosis and treatment plan, and was only kind of surprised to learn that all the girls who went to Dr. Bob had exactly the same problem I did. That would seem to make sense, seeing as we all wore the same goofy shoes and did the same job. As we discussed our mutual back problems, I started to get a little suspicious, though. It would seem to make sense that we would have some of the same physical problems, but it seemed odd that we would all have exactly the same issues. The only thing that differed were the treatment and the payment plans. If we all had the same problem, wouldn't the treatment and payment plans be the same too? This is where I started to wonder about Dr. Bob. I wasn't ready to pull the plug just yet, so I did a little more asking around. I talked to one of the bouncers who was a patient of Dr. Bob's also, and was not at all that surprised to learn that he and I shared the same back problems. The exact same problem. I glanced down to check the guy's shoes, and when I saw he was in sneakers, I began to suspect that Dr. Bob might be a liar. The bouncer then discussed with me his treatment schedule and payment plan. I was not shocked to learn that his payment plans were significantly lower than mine and the girls'. I wasn't sure I liked Dr. Bob anymore. As someone who has spent more than half my life selling a fantasy, I can say that the best way to get somebody to buy someone is to tell them exactly what they want to hear. Like, I can cure your back pain, or I will make you a star. Spotting the pimp pretending to be a talent agent, or the quack pretending to be a doctor, can be one of the most important tools you can learn in life. My suggestion would be to apply a little skepticism to any claim that seems too good to be true. Do some digging and check out the claims being made, even if that person tells you they're a doctor or that they will make you a star. Don't wait for a basket of dildos to be the final clue that you put your faith in the wrong person. You'll have to read the rest of that chapter to understand. Another dirty word. Once I got to a certain level of comfort being open about being a stripper, I thought that I had exposed all that I had hidden. I had taken a bold and brazen step to tell the world what I am. Fuck you all, I am what I am, deal with it. I thought that I had stuck it to all the people who felt I should be ashamed of myself. I am an open book, literally. I have opened myself up and revealed all that I am supposed to keep hidden. I was surprised, actually, that while I still catch some crap for being a stripper, a good portion of people were more than happy to accept it and move on. Many asked questions that allowed me to clarify and dispel the misconceptions. All told, it was really a good thing, even if I pussy a foot around it once in a while. I didn't think there was anything else about myself I had to hide, or anything that would bring the same kind of judgment. I couldn't have been more wrong. I had been keeping another secret, one that would bring a much harsher backlash than stripping ever could have. It never occurred to me that anything could be as socially unacceptable as being a stripper. Deep down I knew, I just never admitted that I was deliberately concealing another part of myself. From not just the world at large, but my family and friends too. It was almost as if coming out as a stripper was simply another way of hiding what I was afraid of saying. In relation, being an unabashed stripper was much easier than being an unabashed atheist. For a long time, I've been fairly open about my rejection of organized religion. Taken objectively, the ideas behind the Catholic faith that I was raised in are pretty ridiculous. I was never really embarrassed when attending a funeral or a wedding in a Catholic church to be the heathen sitting in the pew while everyone else got their cracker and wine. Despite being curious as to what they tasted like, the symbolism of eating flesh and drinking blood is pretty easy for me to dismiss as disturbingly goofy. Most people understand why I would reject that kind of ritual. I never caught any meaningful flack for calling out that bullshit. Most people, even Catholics, were sympathetic to my objections. As long as you believe something, they were cool. Our country guarantees us certain freedoms. You are free to any religion you choose, or to choose no religion at all. Just as you are free to be a stripper and free not to be. It is absolutely that simple. Forcing someone to be a stripper would be universally seen as an infringement on personal freedom. I view, as does our Constitution, forcing religion on other people as the same infringement on personal freedom. Secular stripper. Revealing my atheism left me distant from some people I had been close to at one point. Relationships were not lost completely, but changed. Whereas before I felt like I had to pretend to believe. Now that they knew, it was like they just now noticed the elephant in the room that had always been there for me. A subject to be avoided. A certain weirdness crept into the conversations and left me much more closed off than I was before. A strange feeling of distance that seemed impossible to overcome. Around the people with whom I had previously found comfort, I no longer felt like I had a place. I chose to focus on my son and my husband and look to find peace with the newly strained relationships in my life. FFRF's annual convention was scheduled to be in San Francisco shortly after that. I thought, fuck it, let's go and see what it's all about. A weekend by the ocean with someone else to do the cooking and laundry sounded lovely. I emailed the editor of the FFRF publication a few times and had friended him on social media, so I figured I would know someone. Although I do regret not snooping his profile a little, because had I known he was like 7 feet tall, I would have worn heels. He really is, if you haven't met PJ. Being a stripper in some sense was also isolating. The camaraderie I felt in the presence of other strippers helped, but most of the time I didn't have much else in common with them. This felt much different, like a warm hug from 1,000 people. Every meal I sat at a different table with new people and learned a little more. The acceptance and understanding from the people I met was truly mind-blowing. Because atheists usually come from a place of logic, reason, and curiosity, almost no one flinched when I told them my past profession. There was no inherent judgment about what I did, plenty of questions, but none that felt intended to be cruel. One lady asked me if I ever had a drug problem, which is a common stereotype about strippers, but was willing to learn and listen to me when I explained that I hadn't. Each one of us is unique in our own way. We are all different, and sometimes those differences can make us feel alone. It takes a lot of courage to embrace what makes us different, whether it be ideologically, physically, or if you happen to get naked for a living. Accepting yourself for who you are can be daunting. The need to blend in and not stand out is tempting when you know you are risking disapproval from the very people you care about. What I found is when I was finally able to accept myself, there was a whole community of people ready to accept me for who I was too. If there's one thing that you take away from this book, I hope it is that you know, however you are different, you are not alone. There's somebody out there who understands. There are people out there, probably many, who have gone through what you have or have faced the same things that you have and are more than happy to accept you for who you are. In turn, you might be the very person someone else is looking for. Someone who may have felt abandoned themselves for being different. Stripper, atheist, words are just words. While they have their definitions, they don't totally define us as people. We have to accept the fact that we have the power to define ourselves, and ultimately the only opinion that matters is our own. In a regular social setting, guys will usually go out of their way to make sure they are not looking at your chest. In the strip club, it's not like that. Until you approach them topless. I started to notice that when I had a top on, guys would be desperately looking at my boobs. Late at night, without a top, most guys would do the opposite. I mean, I have my top off, you'd think they would be encouraged to look, but they don't. The majority of the time when I'm approaching strip club customers topless, they go out of their way to look me in the eye. I found this highly amusing and started to challenge them. I would ask them why they weren't looking at my boobs. Put on the spot, most guys would kind of act embarrassed and say things like, I was trying to be polite. Funny that they would be polite now when I'm literally asking them to look. By stripping as long as I have learned a very unexpected lesson about humanity. While I've written a lot about gross customers or guys who are just assholes, really most guys aren't like that. It's just that the nice ones aren't as interesting to write about. The vast majority of men who come into the strip clubs, though not the blackout drunk ones in a bachelor party, are simply looking for a human connection. There are a lot of guys who just want a hug or someone to listen to them. A good portion of guys aren't looking for sex, although there is an obvious sexual component, but just real human interaction. I've always kept very strict boundaries when it comes to men in the strip club, but I can't help the real feelings of empathy I may have towards some of the men I have dealt with. Pure speculation here, but I think the reason men may react slightly differently when I approach them topless is that by being uncovered, they aren't faced with the boundary that clothing presents. I think that clothing provides a buffer from what we are underneath, human. Ultimately, when we are faced with the bare essentials about what makes us people, it makes it easier to see things from someone else's perspective. After all, we're all naked underneath. Maybe clothes are just photo filters for our humanity. It seems that by being naked, I'm able to show people that I am more than a pair of boobs.
I'm going to repeat your questions because we are taping. And so if we hear your question, that's okay, and then I'll repeat it so that we can have it on record. So about 10 minutes of Q&A. Who has a question for Erin? Yes.
How has your family dealt with your brazen atheism?
How has your family dealt with your brazen atheism?
Well, I'll let you know how Thanksgiving goes this year. I've been open with a couple of them, but not really too much because it's been pretty hostile. So it's been a little rough. So I've kind of decided that I'm not gonna beat around the bush anymore and try to sugarcoat it. It just is what it is.
And that's hard. Another question. Yes.
You were raised Catholic, but when and how was your transition
You were raised Catholic, but when and how was your transition
to atheism?
to atheism?
I didn't always realize that I was an atheist, mostly because I didn't really even know what the word was, or when I heard the word, I didn't really know the actual definition of it. But I would say that I was always an atheist. I don't think I ever believed. It always, every time I logicked through it or I thought through something, it didn't make sense. And I just couldn't ever get over the doubt that I had. So I would say that while I didn't always identify as an atheist, I've always been an atheist.
How did you come out atheist to your family?
I told them I didn't believe in God. Yeah. That was pretty much it.
How'd that go over?
Not good. Yeah.
Yeah, she does talk more in her book about dealing with people and coming out. More questions? It's okay. Yes.
So since you said that you have came out as an atheist and you felt that there is a distance between people who are used to close to you from your profession and then to what it is now. So where do you find your social support now that you have felt like you have lost some of that?
Now that you feel that you've lost some of your old social connections, where do you find your connections now?
Yeah.
Honestly, I've made a lot of connections through FFRF, and as coming out as atheist, one of the things that I have found is that there's a lot of people that do feel the way I have, and a lot of people that have felt the way I have when they have had to come out to their family or friends, and most of my friends have pretty much stuck with me. It's my family that I've gotten the most pushback from, and yeah, we kind of just don't really bring it up. There's a lot of things we don't talk about anymore, actually. So
Yeah, and again, in your book, she does talk about how your real friends will come out of the closet. I mean, not poor phrasing. Your real friends will show up. Yes.
How about your husband and your son? How are they along with this? Are they being religiously trained or what?
How about your husband and son and religion?
well, my son has never been to church, and he's actually asked me. He's like, "Mom, what's the church like?" So we presented religion, my husband and I have presented religion and belief and things like that from an objective standpoint. This is what exists, this is what a lot of people believe, and have invited him to read the Bible if he'd like, have invited him to read the Torah and the Quran and to investigate and make his own decision. My husband was raised pretty much an atheist, which actually was like totally foreign to me. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have to go to church? It's ridiculous. You know, get to sleep in on Sundays. And he told me that his father, when he asked about it, told him to read the Bible, and he did, and he came back to his dad and he said, "This is stupid," and he goes, "I know." Yeah, I married an atheist. So, and our son, he identifies, he's 14, so he identifies as an agnostic, and we encourage that because we want him to come to his own decisions and his own ideas. And so our parenting style from that standpoint is to teach him to think and to make his own decision.
I think I saw him, yeah.
Just talk a little bit, Erin, about this. A lot of times there's a miscommunication, a myth about, oh, you're a stripper, you must be a prostitute.
Oh, that's my favorite
Talk
one.
about the stereotype
I love that
of
one.
strippers who are supposed,
Yeah.
they're assumed to be prostitutes.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, my second book, I think it's the first chapter, I call Hooker and Strippers Clothing, because there are some strippers that do also work as prostitutes. My personal opinion is that it is not okay to do that in or out of the strip club. It should be separate. But yeah, no, there are plenty of strippers. Strippers by definition are exactly that, just like atheists, right? You just don't believe in God. That's the end of the definition, right? Or gods. Stripper is just that. You take off your clothes. You're not a prostitute. If you're going to be a prostitute, be a prostitute. The two things should be separated. They aren't always, but they certainly should be. So never assume that if somebody is a stripper or a dancer that they are a prostitute.
And you?
Oh, no, I'm cool. Yeah.
Meaning?
It seems like a lot more work than.
Not a prostitute, okay. Yes.
Question on, you mentioned doing this job, stripping for 20 years. How does aging over 20 years affect the business?
In your 20-year career, how does aging affect your business?
I think I actually got better. You know, sort of like when you leave a peach in a brown paper bag. Yeah, I think towards the end of my career, I appreciated it more. Knowledge and wisdom comes with time and experience. And so I was able to enjoy it more. I was under a lot less pressure. With age comes things like stability, better insurance, you know. So as I got older, I think I actually enjoyed it more.
Cool. Let's try it, Kathy.
Curious with the follow-up to that, did you ever have a client or customer then that, you know, wanted to go further than your
Did you ever have a customer who expected to go further than just you being a
How did
stripper?
you set that boundary?
How did you
I
set the
wouldn't say
boundary?
expected, but asked. Yes.
And how did you
Have
set your
asked.
boundary?
No.
How? Oh, just say
Yeah, pretty much, no, I don't do that, and that's pretty much the end of it. It's fun when they keep trying, though, because you want to see how high exactly they'll go, but, you know, until we get to like indecent proposal, yeah, no, I didn't.
Very cool. Okay, one more, yes.
You talked about your family having doubts about your stripping until you conveyed that you were able to now support yourself. So have you considered that with atheism? That if you found a way to make money doing it, that maybe their concerns would go away? Or they would be
So
more accepting?
since becoming a stripper made your parents happy that you could support yourself, what about
Using atheism.
using atheism to support yourself?
I had not thought about that, but that's brilliant. So, yes, I will consider how to do that.
Well, you've got the book.
I do. So, yeah, we'll see. That's it. I'll just tell them that's how I'm making money.
She's starting here. That's why everyone has to buy 3 Christmas copies. Oh my goodness. Do you want to take more questions?
Can we do one more?
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wondered, so I've always wished that my family somebody in my family would sit down and just talk with me, and ask me, you know, listen to my side, well, you know, why did you choose this? Do you feel like that? Because I just imagine, I don't know, a lot of people would be like that same way. Like they wish that somebody in their family would actually just ask them and listen to their side.
About being a stripper or an atheist?
No, I'm sorry, about being an atheist.
Let me put that on
You
the
know,
audio.
why you chose that, and why don't you believe? Listen to kind of your side.
Can you repeat the question for the audio?
The question is why, if my family would ever sit down and ask me why I'm an atheist or why I believe, or why I don't believe. I think that believers are afraid to ask that question, honestly. I don't think they want to know my answer. I don't think that they want to be led into questioning their own beliefs. So I think that makes them, and that's actually part of why, like I mentioned before, why I don't put atheist on the cover anywhere, is because it is just, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't dunk their head in. So my thought is that if I can get people to question their biases or their beliefs or how they were taught, that maybe, you know, they don't have to sit down and talk to an atheist. They can kind of just absorb that information and maybe apply it to their own beliefs. But I would love it for somebody to ask me. Do I think they will? No, I don't.
I think my mic is off. But,
Oh.
okay. Let's thank her for a good Q&A. She's going to